What's the best piece of dad lore you've ever heard? My dad was never suspicious of people, but when my sister Amber brought home her new boyfriend Gary, something in him changed. Gary was a 23-year-old entrepreneur who drove a leased BMW and always wore expensive watches. He'd show up to our dinners in designer clothes, talking about his latest business ventures and crypto investments. My dad served in Vietnam and had this uncanny ability to read people. He never said anything directly about Gary, but I caught him watching the guy with this intense focus, like he was solving a puzzle. One night, when Amber mentioned Gary was taking her to the Bahamas for her birthday, Dad got this look in his eyes. The next morning, Dad called in sick to work for the first time in 15 years. He spent the whole day in our garage tinkering with this old radio equipment from his war days. Mom thought he was having some kind of breakdown, but he just kept saying, "Trust me on this one." A week later, Gary came over for dinner, bragging about some new investment opportunity he'd found. That's when Dad accidentally spilled wine on Gary's jacket. While Gary was cleaning up in the bathroom, Dad slipped this tiny device into the jacket pocket. Turns out it was a miniature radio transmitter he'd rebuilt from his military days. For the next month, we'd gather in the garage after dinner, listening to Gary's conversations through Dad's old radio setup. Most of it was boring, him talking to his bros about parties and cars. But then came the gold. "Yeah, man, this girl's family is perfect," we heard him say one night. "Her dad's got this huge pension from the military, plus all that disability money. Once I get Amber to marry me, I can convince them to invest in my business. These boomers are so easy to scam." Dad didn't react. He just sat there nodding slowly like he'd finally confirmed something he'd known all along. The next day, he invited Gary over for a man-to-man talk about Amber's future. Gary showed up in his usual flashy outfit, all smiles and handshakes. Dad led him to the garage where he'd set up 2 chairs and a small table. On the table was a bottle of expensive whiskey, Gary's favorite brand. "Let's talk about your business plans," Dad said, pouring 2 glasses. Then, he pulled out a folder. Inside were screenshots of Gary's text messages about scamming us, plus records showing his BMW was 3 months behind on payments and documents of his 2 previous fraud convictions. "Here's what's going to happen," Dad said calmly. "You're going to tell Amber you met someone else. Make her hate you. Break her heart, because if you don't, these records are going to every investor you've talked to in the last year." Gary tried to play it cool, but his hands were shaking. "You can't prove anything," he said. Dad just smiled and pressed play on his old tape recorder. Gary's voice filled the garage. "These boomers are so easy to scam." Gary left that night and called Amber the next day, telling her he'd been cheating with his ex. Amber was devastated for a few weeks, but eventually moved on. She never knew about Dad's investigation. 2 months later, Gary got arrested for running a Ponzi scheme in Tampa. Turned out Dad had anonymously sent his evidence to the FBI. Mom asked him later why he went to all that trouble instead of just telling Amber the truth. Dad just shrugged and said, "Sometimes the best way to protect someone is to let them think they're making their own choices." The radio transmitter is still in our garage, sitting on Dad's workbench. He says he's keeping it ready just in case Amber's next boyfriend needs some extra attention. Last week, Amber brought home a kindergarten teacher named Pete, who drives a 10-year-old Honda and volunteers at animal shelters. Dad didn't even glance at his radio equipment.